Let me tell you about the strangest piece of evidence I've ever used to break down an NBA trade. It's not a stat, it's not a contract number, it's an Instagram unfollow. That's right, Warriors fans, one of the most fascinating offseason sagas in the entire league right now started with a star quietly tapping unfollow on his own team's account, and the basketball world hasn't stopped buzzing since. I know, we're really doing roster analysis based on social media now. Welcome to 2026. But stay with me, because tonight on the show, an ESPN insider followed that trail of clues all the way to a conclusion that could matter enormously for Golden State, because the player leaving those breadcrumbs is a former all-star, a guy with elite game-changing talent who might just be available at the lowest moment of his career. Here's what happened. Shams Charania was breaking down the quiet, slow-motion cracking of the relationship between the San Antonio Spurs and their point guard, De'Aaron Fox. And as he laid out all the little signs, he floated the Golden State Warriors as a team that makes real sense as a potential landing spot. The Golden State Warriors for De'Aaron Fox. A lightning-fast, shot-creating, clutch-scoring lead guard, potentially available for pennies on the dollar because the rest of the league has talked itself out of him. And that's the phrase that should make every Warriors fan lean in. Pennies on the dollar. Because Golden State is a team running out of time, desperate for talent, and the smartest way to add a star when you're in that spot is to buy one at his absolute lowest. So let me put on the detective hat and lay out the breadcrumbs, because once you see them in a row, you can't unsee them. Let me start with where Fox actually is. A little over a year ago, he forced his way out of Sacramento and landed in San Antonio, where the Spurs handed him a massive 4-year contract worth around $229 million, a deal that hasn't even officially started yet. He was supposed to be the veteran engine next to Victor Wembanyama, and for a while it worked beautifully, with the Spurs storming all the way to the NBA Finals. And that's where the trouble started. In those finals, against the Knicks, Fox struggled badly. He was dealing with an ankle injury, his shot deserted him, and in the biggest moments he shrank, including a painful late-game mistake in Game 4. The Spurs lost, and a mountain of blame fell on Fox. So that's breadcrumb number 1, a star coming off a brutal, confidence-rattling finals collapse with everyone questioning him. Breadcrumb number 2 is that enormous contract, nearly $230 million, around $50 million a year, and climbing. And here's San Antonio's problem. They're loaded with young guards. They drafted Dylan Harper, who outplayed Fox in those finals. They've got Stephon Castle, a rising star due for a big payday soon. And Wembanyama's gigantic extension kicks in next year, which is going to crush their financial flexibility. All of a sudden, that Fox contract looks like a problem to be solved, and reporters have named him the Spurs' most likely trade candidate of the offseason. And breadcrumb number 3, the one that lit the internet on fire, De'Aaron Fox unfollowed the Spurs on Instagram, by itself meaningless. In context, with the bad finals and the logjam and the contract and the rumors, it feels like a man whose heart is already drifting toward the exit. It's the kind of clue a good detective files away. Now, in fairness, there's another side. ESPN's Brian Windhorst has reported the Spurs are, for now, committed to keeping Fox as their franchise point guard. So this isn't close to a done deal, but you know how it goes. The official word is always, "we're committed," right until it isn't. The smoke is real, and where there's smoke, smart, desperate teams go looking for the fire. So let me tell you who the Warriors would actually be getting, because the buy low magic is the whole point. Forget the finals for 1 minute. At his best, De'Aaron Fox is one of the most electric guards in the entire league. He is lightning fast, maybe the fastest player in basketball end to end, a downhill nightmare who lives in the paint and finishes through contact. He's a former All-Star and an All-NBA player. He's got a real clutch gene, a history of hitting huge shots in huge moments. And he's grown into a legitimate threat from 3. This is not a finished player. This is a 28-year-old in his prime who had one disastrous month at the worst possible time. And one disastrous month is precisely what turns an untouchable star into a gettable one. So now let's talk about why the Warriors, because the fit speaks to their single deepest need. But first, let me give you real detail on how good this guy has been, because the buy low case depends on it. Rewind a couple of years to Sacramento, and De'Aaron Fox was a genuine star. He made an all-star team. He made an all-NBA team. He averaged around 25 points a game in his best season, and dragged the Kings back to the playoffs for the first time in nearly 2 decades, turning that arena into one of the loudest in the league. He built a reputation as one of the most fearless clutch players in basketball, a guy who hunted the ball in the final seconds and buried dagger after dagger, and his signature trait has always been that ridiculous league-leading speed, the kind that breaks a defense the instant he decides to go. Even in San Antonio, before the finals collapse, he was a major reason that young team punched above its weight all the way to within striking distance of a championship. So when I say the talent is real, I'm not speculating, I'm pointing at a resume. The finals were brutal, yes, but you don't lose that ability in one bad series. It's still in there, available right now for a fraction of its usual price. That's the whole opportunity. Here's where Golden State is. We are in the final act of one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history. Stephen Curry is still magnificent, but the clock on his prime is loud, and the Warriors just missed the playoffs entirely. Their core of Curry, Draymond Green, and Jimmy Butler is aging, with Butler carrying real injury uncertainty. The window to give Curry one last run is closing fast, and they know they cannot afford another quiet, disappointing summer. Now here's the thing about a De'Aaron Fox swing. One of the Warriors' most persistent problems for years has been what happens when Stephen Curry sits down. The offense too often falls apart in his rest minutes because there hasn't been another player who can reliably create offense and pressure the rim on his own. De'Aaron Fox is the perfect answer to that. He's a downhill speed demon who can run an offense, get into the paint, and create easy buckets in a way this roster simply hasn't had. Imagine the pace. Curry's gravity is unlike anything in basketball, and pairing it with a blur like Fox attacking downhill could rejuvenate this entire offense, with Fox getting wide open driving lanes because defenses are terrified to leave Curry. And here's the bonus. At 28, Fox would give an aging Warriors core something it badly lacks, a younger co-star with real two-way upside. For a team desperate to add shot creation around a closing Curry window, a player of Fox's caliber is exactly the kind of swing they should be dreaming about. So now let's talk about how this would even work, because this is where it gets brutally hard, and I won't sugarcoat it. That $229 million contract is a monster, and the Warriors are operating in the most restrictive financial territory in the league, jammed against the aprons that limit how they can build. To trade for Fox, they'd have to match a salary of around $50 million while navigating those apron rules, which is a genuine nightmare. It would almost certainly require packaging multiple contracts, including young players, plus draft capital, and threading a very tight financial needle. I want to be honest, this would be incredibly difficult, maybe the hardest part of the whole scenario. But here's the buy low flip side. Because Fox's stock is at rock bottom, the actual asset cost, the players, and picks would be far lower than it would have been a year ago. The money is the obstacle, the price and talent is the bargain, and the Warriors have shown before they'll get creative to add a star when it matters. And let me add one more piece of detective work because it tightens the case. Here's a detail a lot of people miss. De'Aaron Fox does not have a no trade clause. So if San Antonio decides to move him, he gets no say in it. This doesn't require him to force his way out the way he did in Sacramento. The Spurs can simply decide the math no longer works and pull the trigger. And the math is getting genuinely scary for them. Look at the dominoes. Stephon Castle needs an expensive new deal soon. Dylan Harper, who outplayed Fox on the biggest stage, needs to be paid after that. And Wembanyama, the face of the franchise, has a massive extension coming that will swallow their cap. You simply cannot pay all of those players in a $50 to $60 million point guard who just struggled in the finals. Something has to give, and the most logical thing to give is the pricey veteran whose value just cratered and who quietly unfollowed the team on his way toward the door. When you stack the contract realities, the guard logjam, and the body language, the picture is of a team that may eventually have no choice but to explore a move, whatever the official statements say today. For a Warriors team hunting for a star, that's the kind of situation worth watching like a hawk. But I told you I'd be honest, so let's take the doubts head on, because they're loud on this one. The first and biggest objection is the finals collapse. Why would we want a guy who just shrank on the biggest stage? Fair fear, but he was hurt playing on a bad ankle, and one rough series doesn't erase years of all-star level play. Stars bounce back from bad finals constantly. Betting on a 28-year-old in his prime to rebound with a fresh start next to the greatest shooter alive is a smart bet, not a scary one. Buying low means buying exactly when everyone else is scared. That's where the value is. The second objection is the defense and the fit. Two smaller guards in Curry and Fox, neither a lockdown defender. It's a real concern, but Fox is a far better and more willing athlete defensively than people remember, with the speed to pressure the ball, and the Warriors have Draymond Green, one of the greatest defensive minds ever, to anchor things behind them. The offensive juice Fox provides, especially in Curry's rest minutes, addresses a years-long weakness. The question is whether that trade-off is worth it, and for a team out of time, it just might be. The third objection is the money and the apron, and it's the most real obstacle of all, no question, but complicated is not impossible, and the Warriors have navigated tough finances before to land talent like Jimmy Butler. When the prize is a former All-Star to maximize Curry's final window, the degree of difficulty shouldn't stop you from trying. It should motivate you. And let me hammer on the urgency, because it's what turns a risky idea into a defensible one. The Warriors just missed the playoffs. Let that sink in. With Stephen Curry, one of the greatest to ever lace them up on the roster, they watch the postseason from their couches. That is not a situation where you get to be patient or precious about a player's most recent bad month. The alternative to a bold swing isn't some safer road to contention. It's very likely another middling season that ends in the lottery, another wasted year of an all-time greats twilight. Framed that way, the real risk isn't gambling on a buy low star. The real risk is doing nothing, running it back with a flawed roster, and letting Curry's final chapter slip away quietly. A team that truly believes its window is still open has to be willing to do something dramatic to pry it back open, even if that something is messy, expensive, and a little bit terrifying. And buying a former All-Star at the lowest price of his career, with all his speed and shot creation intact, is exactly the kind of dramatic, calculated swing a desperate contender should be chasing. So let me tell you where my head is at, and then I've got one final thought that I think is the real key to all of this. If the Warriors somehow pull this off, they add a genuine electric former All-Star to maximize whatever is left of Curry's incredible window, and they do it by buying at the absolute bottom of his value, right when the rest of the league is too busy mocking his finals to see the talent that remains. Would it work? That's the great debate, and smart people land on both sides. The defensive questions are real, the apron is a nightmare, but the offensive ceiling, Curry, and a healthy, hungry Fox attacking together is the kind of thing that could make Golden State dangerous again for one last run, and for a franchise that owes Curry everything. A bold, imperfect, buy low swing beats another quiet summer that ends in the lottery. And here's the thought I want to leave you with, the part almost nobody is connecting. The smartest moves in basketball are so often the buy low moves, pouncing on a great player precisely because everyone else is overreacting to a bad stretch. Right now, the whole league is treating De'Aaron Fox like damaged goods, a contract to be dumped, and the signs of a split are everywhere. Right down to a quiet little unfollow when a talented star starts sending those signals and his team starts feeling the financial squeeze. A door cracks open. The Warriors are out of time with Curry, and a former All-Star is sitting right there at his lowest price. When you've got a top 5 player of all time in his final act, you don't wait for the perfect, easy opportunity. You chase the bold one while the window's still open, because the alternative is watching it close with your hands in your pockets. So let me boil it all the way down for you, because I want this crystal clear. A franchise running out of time with an all-time great. A years-long hole in shot creation that shows up every time Curry sits. And a former All-Star, a top-tier athlete in his prime, suddenly gettable at the lowest price of his career because the rest of the league got spooked by one bad month and a quiet little unfollow.